So the first part of this retreat is about the noun. We are a university. We are not a Catholic mercy Jesuit orphanage, nor parish, nor manufacturing firm, nor sports franchise. We are not a Catholic Jesuit mercy, anything but a university. The noun is university. And that's the heart of the mission that we do. That's why we exist. But universities develop character that nuances how they are universities. And I like to call those, following again that sentence that I came across from 1994 in a Jesuit document, the adjectives that you claim as your defining adjectives ought to be in creative tension with the noun. So how are we a university? I want to talk about these adjectives. We are Catholic, excuse me. We are mercy and Jesuit. We are urban. And we are in 2013. That's not exactly an adjective, it's a prepositional phrase. Let's talk about what does it mean when a university says it is Catholic. Universities make that statement differently than other types of institutions do. Universities look for large and deep contextual resonance for all of the things it does. That's what universities are about. So my inclination is to say the heart of our claim to be Catholic has to do with what I think myself of as the longest, deepest, and most central theological proposition in Catholicism. This is not to say you will not find this also in other Christian traditions. But I'm concentrating here because we are a Catholic, Roman Catholic university. But I'm thinking in terms of 2,000 years. I'm not thinking in terms of 10 or 20 years. And the heart of the theological focus of the faith of Catholicism is one kind of simple but important proposition, and that is, how do we imagine God reacts to and approaches the human condition? What is the starting point of God when addressing the human condition? And by the human condition, I mean the whole deal. I mean our playfulness, our creativity, our tenderness, our generosity, our bravery, all that. And I mean our greed, our manipulativeness, our cowardice, our violence, the whole package, leaving nothing out. That's the human condition, and that's what this theological proposition is about. How does God approach the whole deal? Here's a little mental exercise. Suppose where we're sitting is the center of a circle, and the circle is 10 miles in radius. So it goes out 10 miles in every direction. Well, going south, it'd be well into Canada from here. It'd be out near West Dearborn if you went west. It'd be probably in Lake St. Clair if you went east. It'd be out there past the Grosse Pointes. And up north, well, this is 6 miles, so it'd be at 16 miles. All right. So just imagine that space. Now, there's a lot of humanity there. There's a lot of human behavior there. And you can imagine on any given day, some of that behavior you will be glad about and some of it you won't. Agreed? We're all grown-ups? All of it is what we're talking about theologically. How does God approach all of it? And this is deeply embedded at the core of Roman Catholic theology and its way of reading the scriptures, and that is God approaches the human condition with a starting point of affection for the whole of the human condition, not from a starting point of suspicion about the whole of the human condition. Now, there's very good reasons to start with suspicion. I think the first time it ever dawned on me that this was an issue for me was when I was learning how to teach on an Indian reservation when I was in my 20s. Didn't know how to teach. didn't know how to keep order in a class. You don't know any of that stuff when you're starting. Well, it finally dawned on me after about a year of learning how to teach that I had a choice I had to make about how I perceived the world that was the students that I was teaching. Do I lead with suspicion, which means I'm not letting these little get away with anything. They're not getting past me on anything. And little by little, that slips into being your first way of approaching them. You're all capable of cheating. You're all capable of crude and disgusting behavior, blah, blah, blah. On bad days, I'm always inclined to lead with suspicion. Are you not? Bad days? Do you ever notice when you're walking around a crowded place full of people that you don't know, like an airport or a shopping mall or some such thing, sometimes you're in there and everybody looks beautiful to you. You say, wow, everybody's looking beautiful. Other times you're walking around that same place, and you say, God, what disgusting, pathetic people are wandering around this mall, So on good days, you could say, you might find the core teaching of Catholicism, that God always leads with affection for all of the human condition. So that when God works to heal wounds, improve things, correct problems, it's always from a starting point of affection, not a starting point of disaffection. This is very important stuff. It means that when God says we have to fix something, that God isn't saying, I won't love you until I've fixed you. But that's a tempting way to do things. How do you love a whole city? Well, maybe if you could get rid of all the people you wish weren't in it, you could. You know what that's called? That's called a gated community. A gated community is an enclosed physical space with rules about who is allowed in there, either as an owner or as a guest. I once made a trustee retreat for Regis University up in Aspen. At a gated community, there was about 4,000 acres. It had a golf course inside of it, had a town inside of it, But you know what? You drove up to the gate, and they said, what is your name? And you say, my name is so-and-so, and they look you up to see whether you are approved to go through the gate. That's called a gated community. Now, that's an attempt to create a place that is free of all of the bad behavior that you can define and identify. That's what it's for. That's the exact opposite of the Catholic interpretation of God. God doesn't do that. God does not say, I will work to improve things so that I can love it, or you plural. God says, I love you. We need to fix some stuff. But the fixing grows out of the affection, not out of suspicion. A few places where you can see this in the New Testament. If you look at the healing stories about Jesus in the Synoptic Gospels, I don't know, there's maybe 12 or 14 of them in there. What you will find in every case but one is that by the time Jesus heals somebody of whatever it is that is their trouble, leprosy, hemorrhaging, whatever it might be, by the time the healing happens, the befriending has already happened before the healing. And my favorite is right at the end of the first chapter of Mark's Gospel, a very short story. A leper came up to Jesus and pleaded with him on his knees and said, if you want to, you can cure me. Anybody know what happens next? If you want to, you can cure me. Now you got to understand, leprosy at the time of Jesus was so feared that by law, this leper was violating the law by coming this close to Jesus. You're not supposed to get within 30 cubits of someone who isn't a leper. Cubit is about a human form. Well, this is about a cubit, an adult forearm. What happens when this guy violating the law? So that I'm guessing if we were citizens of the time and we saw this leper coming up and getting closer and closer, we might have puked because we'd be so frightened and shocked. She's not coming here. Well, he is. Okay, so he comes up, pleads with Jesus on his knees, says, if you want to, you can cure me. What happens next? Anyone care to? You're too smart. No, I'm not going to let you answer. You know too much stuff.
Apology or forgiveness?
Nope.
Weren't there some people around?
Well, sure, there were all kinds of people around.
They were protesting the fact
Nope,
that
no, they didn't. At least it's not recorded, although I think some of them might have been thinking it.
Didn't he put it back on him and say, if you believe?
Nope, not next.
Is that the one he said, go dip in the Jordan?
Nope. All right, I better tell you. It says, he pleaded with him on his knees and said, if you want to, you can cure me. And then the next thing is Jesus was moved with compassion. And what was the next thing after that?
I think he touched it.
Bingo. He touched the leper. That's next. And after he touches the leper, then he says, of course I want to be healed, and he is healed. Now, if I was the leper, and my body was my problem, a devastating problem, I think I would rather Jesus had cured me first and touched me second. That isn't what happened. And I think the reason is, for Jesus to have cured that leper before he touched him, would be, I think for Jesus, blasphemy, a denial of the nature of God. It would act as though you're not lovable until I make you better. And if you read those healing stories, you'll find one after another, the befriending is first, not second, with one exception. One time when Jesus is on his way in a pretty big hurry in a very large crowd, a woman who, it says, has been hemorrhaging for years, sneaks up behind him and says, if I just touch the tassel of his cloak, I can be cured. She's never met him, and she touches the tassel of his cloak, and she's cured. And then, this is very instructive. So there is a healing that happened before a befriending, and what happens is Jesus goes crazy. It says he whirled around. Isn't that the right verb? He whirled around the crowd saying, somebody touched me. Well, if you know anything about Middle Eastern crowds, their sense of what's the proper distance for people to be at is quite different than ours. If I'm this close to you, it's either about anger or sex, you know. So we always say, you know, this is proper. It's not there. So his friends say, what do you mean, who touched you? You know, you're in the middle of a crowd. He said, somebody touched me, and he searched everywhere for her. Why? What's that about? I think it is, this is how I read it, it would be a horror to him that she could be healed and not befriended. So, if you take that one basic proposition, that the way Roman Catholicism imagines the core relationship between God and the human condition, God and good and evil, God and grace, it is affection leads. And out of the affection, you do hard things. When we send out at the beginning of every semester letters from dean's offices of probation saying your grades are such that you are on probation and you must get your grade level to this point by this time, and then another batch of letters of dismissal for academic reasons. When you do that, you might say, would it be in the keeping with the Catholic identity of the place that somehow or other the people that are responsible for that part of our operation, which is usually an associate dean and a couple of staff people and faculty, if we had the time, wouldn't it be very Catholic to find a ritual to grieve the wound that you weren't able to succeed in healing with that particular student, and to send a blessing with the person you're dismissing, something like that, so that the dismissal is tough. It better be. If you can't dismiss students, you go sell peaches. You know, that shouldn't be a university. But how do you carry your engagement with the wounds and flaws and failures of your students and faculty and staff? How do we do that? The heart of Catholicism says you lead with affection. How do you do research? That's another big part of what we do. You better do research based on a sense that what you're studying, which is some dimension of the human condition, whatever it might be, is human, is beloved, is worth your attention. I'm a historian, and I'm a big believer in saying, if a historian doesn't love the mess of the human condition, you shouldn't be a historian. And if you say your business is to find all the bastards and get them with research, if that's really your motivation, you're not a historian. I don't know what you are. So the first claim of this university as a Catholic university is the claim that we try to live up to God's profound affection for the human condition as it is. And we try to do the hard love and the tough and demanding things and work to heal wounds. We try to do it out of reverence and affection rather than out of disaffection. I think this is enormously hard to do, especially on bad days. So I don't mean to say this is easy. I don't think it is easy at all. It is a claim we make. And we ought to hold ourselves accountable for how good are we at doing tough things when we need to do tough things out of deep reverence for the people involved. And some of the stuff that universities deal with is very tough indeed. I mean, it's a collection of human beings. You know, some of it's going to be tough stuff. So I think that's the heart of the matter when you say you're Catholic. And when you can't live up to that, I don't know about you, but I have moments when I would like to demolish people and institutions on bad days. There's a new practice starting in the city, which I think is pretty good. It's called something like geographical areas defined. The one I read about in Crane's Business Magazine is right east of Eastern Market. It's about a 10 block by 10 block area, and Pulte is taking a lead in this, the big construction company, home building company. They went down there with a whole bunch of people on one day, and in 10 hours, they demolished a few buildings that needed to go. They cleaned out a lot of weeds, and so on. They cleaned out 10 by 8 blocks in a day. And they did the evaluation of the cost of it, and they found out that it cost about 55% of what it costs when you do the one building at a time demolition stuff, something like that. Well, I've had fantasies about Livernois between the lodge and here. Bring in the Pulte people. And my fantasies are, which things do I want to disappear? Now, some of these are the abandoned buildings surrounded by ragweed, but I'd really like to get rid of the one immediately north of Livernois on the west side. It sells body parts. It's a sign. It's a dog store, and it says what it sells. You know, well, it sells a bunch of things, but thrown in there, right on the big front sign, is body parts. And I say, you know, I'd like to get rid of that. I mean, because that stretch of Livernois from the lodge to here kills us every day by people that are interested in considering our university, and most of them will come down on the lodge or up on the lodge, but probably down, and they'll come out and they start driving down Livernois, and there's 6 blocks of that crap before they ever see the campus. Well, wouldn't it be nice to just go down there and nuke them all that stuff. Now, controlled demolition is in fact a great strategy for one part of urban renewal. Nonetheless, on bad days, I don't think they want to put me in charge of demolishing buildings. Yes. So that's what I want to say about the first of the adjectives, that we are a Catholic institution. That's the heart of the matter. 2, we are a Catholic university in the tradition of the Sisters of Mercy and the Jesuit order. I can't say too many things in a little bit of time, but let me say a couple things. Catherine McAuley, when she founded the Sisters of Mercy in 1828 in the middle of Dublin, on what is now famously Bagot Street, famous because of Catherine McAuley, she had become moderately wealthy by a bequest. And the way I would call Catherine McAuley up to then, she knew how to live in the Dublin with good health care drinkable water, fresh vegetables, enough warmth in the winter. That's the Dublin she grew up in, and that's the Dublin she knew. She knew how to be in that Dublin. But what begins to happen to her mysteriously, sacredly, is she invests that modest wealth she has, and she builds a very large building for the time called the House of Mercy, using that money to do it. And she brings to the House of Mercy, both on a boarding basis and on a day basis, women and children of the desperately poor. Now you could say that in terms of the vision that led her from being a private citizen to becoming the foundress of a religious congregation of women, that what she began to see as sacred is the education of the brutally poor. That's a different Dublin than the Dublin of good drinking water and fresh vegetables and good health care and all that. This is the Dublin of terrible death rates and dreadful conditions. And one of her core statements is, it is our calling to educate poor women, and with poor women come poor children. That was in the 1820s. That's the beginning, by the way, of a phenomenon that is now common all over the world, and that is cities that grow large because people living in the countryside are driven off the land because people are finding the use of the land for higher profit agriculture drives them off the land. They're doing subsistence farming, rice and beans in Mexico, for example, potatoes and a few other things in Ireland. But in Ireland, sheep were big business because the Industrial Revolution in England is based on textiles. Was what made them a world power. They began to push people off the land. It was called the enclosure process. Well, where are those people going? Well, they end up going into cities. So the desperately poor that are living in Dublin, and Catherine Macaulay comes to this great conversion moment or period of her life. That's the same thing that is driving people into every large city in the world. Mexico City with 30 million people. There's huge wealth there. But the reason there's 30 million people there is because a lot of people have been driven off the land by agriculture that grows luxury crops for the northern market. Strawberries in February, that sort of thing. So Catherine Macaulay was at the early stages of what is now a chronic problem of great violence all over the world. Who gets to live where you can grow food that's good to eat? So what the Sisters of Mercy bring to the institutions that they are connected with, which is a very powerful network of hospitals, much more powerful than the Mercy network of universities, but also their network of universities, is a sense that you must not get too far away from very poor people. That's an understanding of the nature of God. If God loves the whole world, then if there are desperately poor people, then God must want you to pay attention to them, because you don't have the right to say, well, I'm not part of the whole world, I'm just part of my part of my city. And we've got a good tax base and we're doing pretty good. Our schools are fine. This is a very demanding vision that Catherine Macaulay brings to a university. How good are we at engaging the whole fabric? How good are we? And it's not easy for a university to engage the whole fabric, because you've got to have standards of achievement to run a university. So I don't mean to say these are easy things. There's much more you can say there. A little bit about St. Ignatius. St. Ignatius, out of his method of prayer, says, the most important decisions you make in your life are, do I stay where I am right now, or do I go to some other place in the world where I am called to be that is a greater good than where I am right now? And where that led the early Jesuits, much to their surprise, within about the first 8 or 10 years, is to begin to get serious about schools. They weren't founded to run schools. They actually thought at first that their mission was to resolve feuds and disputes where people kill each other, family by family, and all that stuff. Ignatius and the early Jesuits talk about our vow is to go anywhere in the world. That's a vow to be mobile, a vow of mobility. So for Jesuits, it matters that wherever your body is, it is a sacred obligation to try to get where your body is. So, for example, a lot of Jesuits travel a lot. A lot of Jesuits in this house travel a lot. I travel a lot. When I go to Denver for a meeting, and the meeting is from Friday afternoon till Sunday noon or something like that, do I get there or do I not get there emotionally? Do I get there enough that when I leave I'm sad? And then if I do that wherever I travel, and I travel maybe 25 times a year, does that mean I have to learn how to come somewhere, meet that someplace, let it meet me, engage in it, and then grieve when I must move on? Yeah, that's what it means. How does that apply to a university? Well, in tons of ways. Do you allow yourself to fall in love with another crop of students? Because if you do, when they leave, you will grieve. If you don't grieve, then you never met those students. Now let's go a little more fine grain. A lot of people in here do walk-in service kinds of jobs. People come to you for this or that, right? What does it take to let every single person that you encounter become beautiful to you while you're in the exchange, so that when the exchange is over, you grieve that it's over? That's hard work. These are not easy ideals, and I'm not saying that the university lives up to these ideals all the time. I'm saying they are ideals we claim. We claim to be intimate with the fabric of the human condition, and in the case of Catherine Macaulay, we claim to privilege intimacy with brutally poor people. So you can ask, how are we doing on that? That's every bit as good a question as the core question about Christianity. They're intimately entwined. It's always tricky to talk about these three topics in a short time, as if that's all there is to say about Catholicism, that's all there is to say about the Sisters of Mercy, or that's all there is to say about the Jesuits. But it's meant to say these are real commitments, and the university has a responsibility to do its best to take them seriously and to try to live out of that vision. Let's say a little bit about urban. We claim also to be urban. What does that mean? Here's an exercise for you. This campus is about 90 acres, give or take. So a chunk of land, lots of buildings, labs, this and that. Imagine if you had magic and you could take the entire campus as is, lift it up, and move it out to Wixom, or maybe up to Rochester Hills, something like that. Would it make, and plunk it down there and have been there all along, would it make a difference about how we do business, what students come to work here, how we raise money, if we were in Wixom or we were in Rochester Hills or something like that? Would it make a difference? Yeah. So, here's the question. We're not in Wixom. We're not in Rochester Hills. We're not in Bloomfield Hills. We're not in Grosse Pointe. We're in Detroit.
I think it would be easier to get students.
I'll bet it would be. The name Detroit scares the bejesus out of people. In fact, here's I had some admissions people in the last of these retreats, and I was talking to them and said, there's two meanings of the word Detroit right now. And you have a choice about how you talk about Detroit, but depending on which one you emphasize. In one, Detroit is a stink hole and it's full of crime and deterioration, and it's been falling apart for 50 years, okay? If that's what you're going to do, then you're not going to pay much attention to Detroit in your materials. You're going to talk about the campus, which is lovely, and the faculty-student relationships, which are charming and lovely and strong and blah, blah, blah. And you're going to sort of whistle right by Detroit. The other meaning of Detroit in the last few years is it is a city in the beginning of a complex and astonishing rebirth. Same word. I said, well, when you do admissions, which one of those are you going to do? Are you going to say, this is a chance to come and work as a student in a university at the heart of one of the most astonishing, complex rebirths in the history of the United States, and you get to be part of it? Well, it depends on how you talk about it. But suppose you say, the only reason, let's be realistic, the reason we're here is because when we moved here in 1926, this was the edge of town. This was the end of the trolley line, was right out here. And we're here still because we can't get out of here. We're stuck with being here. That's why we're here. There is no magic to move us to Wixom. Now, how people who work here engage that question? Are we here because we love to be a part of this place? It sounds a lot to me like the core principle of Catholicism. God does not hold God's own nose because of the stench rising from a rat hole like Detroit, saying to God's own self, you know, I'd like to just nuke the whole damn thing and move to California, you know? That's, theologically I'm talking about, that's just not the Christian, the Catholic vision of God. God loves this place every bit as much as any other place. So how do we live up to that? And here is where I want to call your attention to the most ambiguous technology you use every day. I'll bet you every one of you has it on you right now. And when you talk about whether you welcome the whole of reality or you're suspicious with a lot of it, now that business, this is hugely ambiguous, this technology. It's not your cell phone. Not even close. It's this one. These are called keys. Keys go with locks. Keys and locks go with spaces. They are meant to create spaces that are limited access spaces so that only people approved get to go in them. Whether it's a drawer or a car or a house or a university campus. Don't you use these? Doesn't the fact that so you could go through your keys and say, what enclosed spaces do I claim proprietary power over so that nobody gets in there except people I approve? That's what they are. Well, then what do you do with the claim that God welcomes everybody? Or what are you going to do? How are you going to answer Catherine McCauley? You say, for example, here's a great example in this campus. We spent some money on the first floor of the library about 3 years ago and transformed it beautifully. And it increased the student participation in that building by 400%. It's got a great coffee bar. There's 50 computer workstations, and then there's all kinds of laptops, you know, all that. It's a great place. Well, the university allows people from the neighborhood to use 12 of those computers, except during final prep time. You know, final prep time, they say, sorry, you know, we're in lockdown mode. Everybody's having a heart attack around here. So we have people who are not approved members of the university community, don't have an employee card or a student card, in the library using our computers as a service to the community. Well, that makes some people kind of nervous. I know it does. It's been a problem in the library. And about 2 years ago, once, some guy, twice in about a week, flashed some people. Well, you know, you say, this is a university. Now, come on. I mean, what the hell do we have a guard booth for if you can't keep assholes out like that? You know what I mean? It doesn't take long to say, with my keys comes a shotgun. By God, my proprietary areas, I'll blow their toes off if they step over my lines, okay? On bad days, don't you think most of us have a lot of that in us? Let's call it the key, lock, and shotgun mentality. Yeah, I think we do. My point is not that it is easy to live up to these commitments that we claim. It isn't easy. We don't do it well all the time. But the claims are meant to be there in our face so that we ask ourselves, how do we get better at living up to these claims? Because you don't have to have this set of convictions that you're trying to live up to as an institution. There are other ones that you could. You could say our highest priority is to have a national reputation for excellence in sports. I mean, serious excellence. I mean, where you take in $30, $40 million a year in television contracts, things like that. That's not an evil commitment, and it has its own costs. It's hard to live up to that one too. No? I have found though that high-end sports programs, you keep reading, they cheat on the margins, especially when it comes to coddling star athletes. Famous case in Notre Dame where a girl from St. Mary's College next door accused a football player, of raping her, and she got stonewalled. At least that's the way it's reported by the university. They didn't take her claim very seriously. She committed suicide. Those things happen. My point is not that the commitments that universities make are all the same, nor do I make the claim that we are good at living up to them well. I'm saying we have some commitments. And ours at this place start with Catholic, Mercy, Jesuit, and Urban. Those are the claims. They're not easy to live up to.